Hello, kids. Welcome in. It's 12:05. May I be the first to say a good afternoon. It's Super Talk 99.7 WTN. My name is Matt Murphy, and we'll hold court until about 3 o'clock this afternoon until they pull us off the radio, whichever comes first. It's Tuesday, October 3, 2023. Thank you for being around today. We've a busy day. I tell you when it's not a busy news day, and I tell you when it is, and it is. And I'll give you all of the headlines you need to know about during your lunchtime hour and beyond in episode 427 of the proceedings here at Super Talk 99.7 WTN. I do all of that after we get the pleasantries out of the way. Good afternoon, once again. Headless Bell, we call him. Bell K's behind the glass, making sure that everything that comes out of our speakers sounds as good as possible. I mentioned it's episode 427. You can catch us on a variety of platforms, obviously the radio side of things. Internet streaming, up and available, streaming platform of your choosing. Just type in Super Talk and you'll find us. And then there's Super Talk TV, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Twitch. We're up and running there. F&M Bank chat line up and running as well. And the title of episode 427 is...
Matt Murphy. We vote to oust him at 2 p.m. Be ready. No replacement planned.
Well, it sounds like D.C. Motion to vacate. There's a lot of people that would like to vacate me, but not a lot of people that want this noon to 3 time slot. Yes. So that's where we start. Matt Gaetz has been most vocal about his desire to see a new speaker, and he doesn't really seem to care who that person is. Matt Gaetz obviously has filed a motion to vacate the chair. That would be the Speaker of the House. We were talking just before we came on air, Bell K and myself, about what happens after that. Now, there's an expectation that there are enough Republicans that they could oust the Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy, if the Democrats all vote to oust the Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy. The math gets a little iffy if some of the Democrats decide to stay home. You have to have, 217? I think that's the right number. 235? Yeah, it'd be 217. No, 217 would be 434. You need 218. But that number goes down if there aren't enough people voting in the chamber. In other words, there's 435 members of the House of Representatives. You have to have 218, a simple majority, in order to become Speaker of the House. So, and you don't have to be a member of the body to become Speaker of the House. So, if there are...
This is one of those rare situations where they don't need a quorum at all. Quorum's got nothing to do with it, right?
See, I don't know if you got to that point if you would have to have a quorum. I don't know the answer to that. So if you have to have a majority, I don't know if you have to have a majority or not.
Okay.
Which would be a quorum.
Very confusing.
But I do know that as the number of members present goes down, the number of votes necessary also goes down.
Only in D.C. does it have to be this complicated.
Right. So if you're not in the body or if you vote present, that means the number 218 goes down consistent with the number of people in the body or the number of people voting present. Yes, it's very confusing. So Democrats aren't going to vote for Kevin McCarthy. But what Democrats could do is stay out of the House of Representatives chamber. And if they do that, then that raises the threshold of the number of Republicans that it's going to take to boot Kevin McCarthy. Does that make sense to everyone? I was told there would be no math. One way or the other, a number of our representatives have declared themselves. Tim Burchett is one of them. He was on the show with us yesterday and described very honestly and openly about his internal debate as to what to do regarding Kevin McCarthy. He's made his decision. I've got the audio, and we'll play that for you coming up in just a couple of minutes. In the meantime, a number of other stories to tell you about. I mentioned that it was a busy news day. Hunter Biden has offered his plea of not guilty in his gun case. You know, there's an interesting case to be made that it is one of the charges against him goes against the Second Amendment of the Constitution. Not the one where he lied on the form. The one where it is illegal to be, quote, a drug user, not to be using drugs, but to be a drug user while in possession of a gun. And I have some questions about the legality of that from a Second Amendment standpoint, because that doesn't feel right. I understand the concept of not wanting someone who's actively using drugs to be in possession of a gun, but someone who's more broadly a, quote, drug user, that's like saying that people that get drunk on occasion aren't allowed to own weapons either. Anyway, that case going on. The Trump case in New York City is going on as well. I have more on that in just a second. Justin Jones, one of the Bullhorn trio, I would call them something else, had the ability to call them something else. It starts with bull and it ends with trio, and there's something different than horn in the middle. But Justin Jones has filed a lawsuit against Cameron Sexton for somehow denying him some sort of constitutional rights. We'll try to make sense of the senseless as the show progresses today. And then there's another case coming out of Huntsville, Alabama, that I want to tell you about regarding police officers. And actually, I think I need to ask our first guest today about this. I'd be very curious what his thoughts were, because he served for 18 years in the Metro Nashville Police Department.
Saw the video
of the guy.
Yeah, it was on a civil rights lawyer's channel.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a lot of very interesting commentary that went with it.
The upshot is a federal court has ruled, for those who've missed this case, 3 federal judges have sided with a mechanic in Huntsville, Alabama, in a false arrest case. They wrote an opinion this week that recertified that if you are not under suspicion of committing a crime, you do not have to provide identification to police. We don't demand that you show your papers in the United States of America if you're not suspected of commission of a crime. And in this case, it's very, very intriguing because, look, I support the police. I believe in the police, and I understand that if you make the decision to draw that line in the sand, you're probably going to have a bad day or a bad night, but you're also probably going to win on the back end if you've done nothing else wrong. Here's the case. So a car broke down in a church parking lot. One of the employees of a church had their car break down. They called a mechanic. The mechanic said, "I'll get right over." The mechanic came over and got the keys to the vehicle and went out and began fixing the vehicle. Realized he had to go back to his shop for something, got delayed, and eventually came back. It was approaching nightfall when he came back, and he started working on the car. Police officer pulled over, asked him what he was doing. He said, "I'm working on this car." The guy said, "I need to see your ID." I mean, I'm shortening the story, but the police officer said, "I need to see your ID." And the guy said, "I don't have time to deal with you. I'm trying to fix this car and get it back to my shop." And the police officer escalated the situation. Another cop got involved, and they arrested him for refusing to show his ID. He told them what he was there for. He told them why he was there, and apparently they didn't take him at his word. So the guy immediately said, "I'll show you my ID. There's no reason to do this. There's no reason to escalate this." But the courts have ruled that, in summary, it has been clearly established for decades that police are free to ask questions and the public is free to ignore those questions. What happens after that really depends on the circumstances involved in the nature of the questions and the nature of the ignorance. But we'll get into that story today as well.
Well, apparently in that video, it was stated that he tried to sue them, and the courts threw it out based on qualified immunity. And the appeal was that they stripped the qualified immunity, sent it back down to the lower court, and told them to proceed with the lawsuit.
Yes. Reading that now. The lawsuit can go forward against the Huntsville police officers, Krista McCabe and Cameron Peralay. The judges found that the officers are not entitled to qualified immunity, a legal doctrine that shields public officials from lawsuits when they're performing official duties, because what they did went beyond the boundary of the law when they arrested him for declining to offer his identification. In other words, one of the things they did they suggested that he had to show them his ID because he was operating a vehicle, and he was not operating a vehicle. He was working on a car. And then the suggestion becomes, well, you got here some way. I mean, the problem is, in a lot of circumstances, and I love the police, I love the men and women in uniform, and you guys know that. I'm well established on that front. But sadly, if they decide they want to see your identification and you decline to offer them your identification, oftentimes it is the case that police officers that understand the law will then begin searching for suspicion of a crime in order to get your identification. And that's not right. I understand that a lot of cases, they're just trying to do their job. But I also understand that this is still the United States of America, and we don't have to show our papers without a justifiable cause or reason in the United States. All right, it's 12:15. Let me get into a little bit of the Trump case, and then I'll tell you who our first guest is. So, have you followed any of this civil case in New York?
A little bit. I wouldn't say I'm deeply versed in it.
This is more than just an attack on Donald Trump. I did a deep dive into this. This is an attack on a basic ability for a business to do business with a customer of their choosing without interference from government. So
we can't have that.
The accusation against Donald Trump is that he overvalued his business when securing loans. And by the way, nobody's upset at Donald Trump except for the government, right? So Donald
it's
Trump,
not like he's being sued by the bank or something.
No, he paid the loans back.
Yeah.
So he was applying for loans. He estimated the value of his businesses. It is up to the banks. It is up to the institution that he is borrowing money from to come to an understanding as to whether or not the valuation is appropriate. At least that's what I thought.
And they do that all the time. It's like if you were to go to apply for a bank loan to get a house, they're going to want to see an estimate on the value of the house.
Of course they are. And they're going to want to see certain levels of documentation. And they forego that sometimes. For example, when I sold my house in Birmingham, because the person buying my house had $100,000 in cash, they did not get an appraisal on my house because they recognized that $100,000 down payment would put us well within the margins of the value of the house. So Donald Trump is being attacked, obviously. This is a civil case, in my estimation, that's going nowhere, even with a leftist judge that is out to get Donald Trump. This is a matter of Donald Trump engaging in a business interaction with a company and stating the value, maybe even overstating the value of his business. And the government intervening, the business is fine. They got their money back.
Their interest.
And no one is accusing the business and Trump of colluding with one another in some way that was underhanded or fraudulent. I think Brian's in Nashville. He's into banking. Let's get to Brian, see what he has to say about all of this. Hey, Brian, how are you?
Hey, brother, how are you?
I'm doing well.
I've spent a long time in financial services, banking, and in credit unions mostly, of course, and you're exactly right. I mean, when you're asked to fill out an application for a loan, you're asked all your assets, your income, and they want to verify, of course, but it's independently done. It's not, you don't take that. If you said, I make $100,000, but I'm going to put $1 million. Well, we'd want to loan you more money based on a fraudulent attestation is what they call it. You attest to that because you sign it, and that's fraud if you sign something that's wrong. But if he puts down Mar-a-Lago is worth $720 million and it turns out to be worth $1 billion after the bank does its due diligence, then they can loan him more money, and it's up to them. Y'all are exactly right.
Well, and conversely, Donald Trump is within his legal ability, it's my understanding, Brian, and you tell me if I'm wrong, he's within his legal ability to estimate on his own what he thinks the value of his property is based on the fact that it's his property, right?
Absolutely.
So, and even if we think it's Bravo Sierra, if Donald Trump says, look, if anybody else owned Mar-a-Lago, it would be worth $50 million, but this is Trump's property, so I think it's worth $100 million based on that fact alone. That's up to him, and it's up to the bank to determine whether or not he's telling the truth.
And his brand, as you know, carries a huge amount of value, and there's probably somebody smart enough out there to calculate that. But everywhere I see on A&E, they have TV shows all the time where the backdrop's Trump hotel out there in Las Vegas, just free advertising. He's worth a lot more, and people get mad that he filed bankruptcy on I think a casino up in Atlantic City. He used the law. They let him. When they write the bankruptcy laws, they let people come to. I worked in bankruptcy court for a while. You wouldn't believe how that's used.
Well, it's fascinating that this case hinges on, and thank you, Brian, for the expertise on. I got to scoot. This case, it's not a matter of the bank saying that Donald Trump defrauded them. Everyone involved in this interaction, this business contract, is happy with it. Donald Trump borrowed money. The banks lent him money. He paid the banks back the money, and everybody's fine with it. This is the government intervening with a private business interaction and declaring that the business interaction was fraudulent because they determined that Donald Trump overestimated his value. That is not the government's business. That is an overreach, and that's a dangerous. If they'll do it to Trump, they'll do it to you and do it to me. What does the government have to do with that private business interaction? Except to interfere in an effort to get the orange man. All right, we'll talk about that today. We're going to set it aside for just a moment and speak to a good friend of ours that I've been trying to get back in the studio for months, but apparently he's too busy. But not today. His name's Brink Fiddler. He owns Defense Systems, and he's coming up next on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Super Talk 99.7 WTN. It is 12:25. Glad to have you with us on this Tuesday edition of the Matt Murphy Show. We're here till 3 o'clock. We'll hand off to The Drive with Brian Wilson. At that time, you can listen to us on the radio. You can listen to us internet streaming. You can also watch us on Super Talk TV, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, where I expect, I'm not certain because I don't have my monitor yet in the studio, but I expect that you will see the beautiful mug of Brink Fiddler of Defense Systems. Hey, man, how's it going?
Great. How are you?
Hold on. Stand by. Okay. Hello.
That's better. Yeah, great.
Yeah, that's nice. How's it going?
Good. Busy, but good.
I know you're busy, and I love that. I know you're here for a specific reason, which I also love, which is there's a charitable component to why you're here. But it's good to get you back in studio.
Yeah, same. I appreciate you having me back.
How I've always said that I want you to have to go find other work to do for a lack of business, but sadly, that's not going to happen anytime soon. And I do appreciate, for those that are aware of defense systems and what you do, and I talk about you on a regular basis, business it's up, but that can be a good thing too, in as much as people are aware. I like to say on the ads that we do for you that the chances of you finding yourself in a violent situation in the workplace or in your church or school are very, 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 very low. That's the good news. Bad news is they're not zero, and that's where you come in.
Right, and it's a time thing that, you've been through the training, so it's those first, 2, 3, 4 minutes that people have to know how to perform and know what to do, because that's when all the damage is done. I mean, Covenant School is a great example of that. Every single victim over there had been shot in the first 3 minutes. So, by the time the officers were dispatched, every person had been shot. So, it's, again, back to that critical, that's where we focus. But yeah, busy's good, but busy's bad for society, right?
Well, that's true. But you're here for a different reason. Tell me why.
Yeah, so you're intimately familiar with the soft T tourniquet by TACMed Solutions, because I have an outstanding picture of Tracy Mendenhall putting one on your arm during our class.
I've got one right behind me.
So the company that produces the soft T is called TACMed Solutions. They were in town not too long ago, attended our training, got to talking, and they told us about a pretty cool nonprofit that they're involved with called Cops Direct. And what Cops Direct does is they raise money to donate medical gear to law enforcement agencies, which is pretty awesome. Because as you know, on that component of what law enforcement does, it's huge, because they're the first on scene. So they don't really have any boots on the ground here in the Nashville area, but they are going to be doing a golf tournament here to raise money for Cops Direct. And so I wanted to come on air and give that a plug and see if there are people that would be interested.
Most people, I want to back up for a moment. You taught me this, that I don't know that most people understand the dynamic between the police department, the fire department, EMTs, and how it's a fairly recent thing that police officers are learning more and more how to offer and assist medically along the lines that you teach. Police officer. There was a time in our not too distant past that police officers did their job and then waited for the medical teams to come in to do their job. That's kind of, there's a blend now. Is that a fair way of saying it?
Very fair. And it's not, you're right, it's not that old. When I was at the police department, it was, my version of pre-hospital and trauma care training was telling the dude to hold on, the ambulance is coming. We didn't get much of that. But we've learned our best lessons on the battlefield, right, and in the desert. And a lot of that stuff came back to us from the military about how we need to be able to do certain things in the first few minutes. We're not asking EMS to come into a hot zone. That's not their job, right? They don't wear body armor and guns and all that. So what we found, though, is that being able to treat people on the pre-hospital phase prior to EMS getting there has made a massive difference. The police department does a program called Tactical Emergency Casualty Care, same course you went through that we teach.
Right.
They started that in the fall of 2018. And Vanderbilt tracks that program for people that they treated and people that they would consider saved by Metro cops. And since they started that program, Vanderbilt has credited Metro Police Department with saving, not treating, saving over 400 people in this town just by the pre-hospital and trauma care training. So it's a huge component.
By applying tourniquets, by doing some basic field medical care.
That's right. Tourniquets, chest seals, pressure dressings, all that stuff you learned. And so it's a fantastic thing.
But toward that end, if I'm understanding what Cops Direct does, that's not, police officers are not issued tourniquets. Are they?
It depends on the agency.
Okay.
Larger agencies, yes.
Okay.
Smaller agencies don't typically have the funding to get medical gear and medical training gear. You figure just one training mannequin, for example, if you want a lifelike training mannequin, you're talking $70,000. Well, the value in having that's outstanding to be able to train on something so lifelike. But, these smaller departments don't have that kind of money. So Cops Direct is all about getting medical gear and medical training gear in the hands of law enforcement that can't afford it otherwise.
No,
which
I
is
love
pretty
it.
awesome.
I love it. Well, let's talk more about it on the other side of the break. And I also want to get your opinion on a couple of matters in the news. While I have you here, might as well lean on your expertise and your training. You're 18 years at the Metro Nashville Police Department. Brink Fiddler's with us. He's our great friend with the defense systems. We'll tell you all about the possibility of you being able to give back to Cops Direct in just a moment. It's 12:30 on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Hey, friends, it's Matt Murphy, the Dr. Gill Center for Back, Neck, and Chronic Pain Relief located in Franklin. They want to see you. Friends, if you have back pain, knee pain, neck pain, let's just cut to the chase. If you hurt anywhere where something is hinged or moves, your shoulder or your elbow or your knees or your ankles or your hips or your neck, and certainly your spine, which moves every way to Sunday, you need to get to the Dr. Gill Center because you're probably taking pills to cover up the pain. If you're not taking pills, you want to. You're probably contemplating taking another step if the pain has gotten severe enough and talking to someone about surgery. Don't do these things before you make an appointment with the Dr. Gill Center. The Dr. Gill Center for Back, Neck, and Chronic Pain Relief can assist you in a natural way, alleviating the pain, getting blood flow back to the places that hurt, reducing the pain, the swelling, accelerating the healing, and reducing the inflammation in the body. Yes, it's chiropractic care. It's spinal in nature. It's bone in nature. But they also do so much with soft tissue nowadays. They want to talk with you. 615-882-4838 is the number to schedule an appointment. I encourage you to do this. 615-882-4838. The Dr. Gill Center for Back, Neck, and Chronic Pain Relief in Franklin. Super Talk 99.7 WTN. I love what just happened, by the way. 12:35. You guys don't know what just happened, but I love what just happened. Like, I'm in a discussion with my friend Brink Fiddler. We're talking about the Second Amendment. We're talking about gun rights, and I love it when I get to make my final point and Brink's about to say something. We gotta go back on the radio. Maybe we can talk about what we were just talking about in a minute after we finish talking about Cops Direct.
It is your show, by the way, so it's fine.
It's all good.
Yep.
So tell me when and where and how people can get more information about this golf tournament that I very much want to be a part of.
Yep. So it's on the 9th at Hermitage Golf Course.
On October 9th?
Uh-huh.
Okay, right around the corner.
Around the corner. Registration starts at 11 and shotgun start at 1 o'clock. They do have one team that's been paid for and donated. We're trying to currently fill that with some people from Covenant, either from the school or families or whatever. We're trying to get that taken care of for them. Anything we can do to kind of support any of the Covenant community. But the cause is very obviously worthy. I mean, because, the stuff that Cops Direct does could literally potentially save somebody's life by the equipment they're donating and all that. So I think it's a great organization. I just was recently, again, introduced to them through TACMed Solutions. And again, I think that picture's out there. Didn't you post that on social media? Tracy putting that tourniquet on you?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so, yeah, it's a fantastic tourniquet, as you know. It's all about the application, too, by the way.
Well, here's what. Let me just take it. So in order to, and I've learned this through our training here at Cumulus Nashville and also the TECC course that I went through with you over at Glock Store, that if you are properly applying a tourniquet, it hurts the person that the tourniquet is being applied to. Whether it's the arm hurts, the leg's pretty bad until you stand up. Then it's really bad.
Yeah.
But as you described in our training, look, it has to hurt in order to do its job, which is to stop blood flow. However, you're shot at that point, or you're badly hurt. You're either shot or your leg is broke. You got compound, or whatever's going on. The pain that you're experiencing pales in comparison to the concept of, I don't know, dying. Yeah. Right? So that's the idea. That's the trade-off.
Yeah, and they are ridiculously painful. Matter of fact, there's a podcast I listen to a lot called The Sean Ryan Show, and I'm listening to an episode right now, and the guest is a guy named Mark Geist. Mark was on the roof at Benghazi, right? So he was one of the survivors from Benghazi, but he got blown up by those 3 mortars right there at the end. Of you guys have seen 13 Hours, right? He does survive, but I literally just heard him say this yesterday. He's talking about all his wounds, the shrapnel, his arm getting blown out, all that kind of stuff. And he was on this plane leaving there, and he said, okay, now all of a sudden my attention turned to the pain from the tourniquet. Like, okay, this hurts. Over everything else that had happened to him, all of a sudden the pain from the tourniquet took over. Because they are just terrible.
Well, you said, and I don't want to belabor this, but for those of us who have had tourniquets applied to us on multiple occasions, I mean, right, Belle? Belle knows what I'm talking about. It hurts.
Shut up.
Quite a bit. I was just including you in the conversation. Just wanted to make you feel a part of it. I think you were the one that said that you have seen, or there are examples out there of people who have literally been shot.
Yep.
And you get to the scene, apply a tourniquet to prevent loss of life or loss of limb, and they complain about the tourniquet.
Oh, yeah. Tracy has seen, I mean, she's the one that said that, I'm sure, at the class. There's body cam footage after body cam footage after body cam footage
of
that very thing. That's right. Not the bullet hole. When you saw the body cam footage I showed from Vegas, the lady had been shot in her knee. The officer goes to put the tourniquet on. She starts screaming about the tourniquet. So anyway, they're painful. But
yeah, they do hurt, but they save your life.
Coming full circle. So, I mean, that's the cool thing is TACMed Solutions really partners with Cops Direct to get this medical gear. Of course, they don't do it for completely free, but they do it at a very reduced rate. TACMed does in partnership with Cops Direct to get this gear out there to the right people, so that not just large cities with big budgets can handle it, because I don't care who you are, you're going to bleed to death just as fast as anybody else. And if somebody doesn't have that training or equipment, it could obviously make a big difference.
You could tell these stories on a day all day, but I don't want to say favorite, but the example that comes to my mind more often than any was before I met you, actually. I was still in Birmingham, and the Helena Police Department, which was my hometown at the time, that was where I lived at the time. The Helena Police Department, they were a small department, but they had just been trained on tourniquets and had just received tourniquets as a part of their gear. And this was days later where a police officer came upon an accident where the guy was driving his pickup truck. He, wasn't paying attention. Something happened where he wasn't paying attention to a curve, and he went off into a ditch, went through the ditch, and went through a barbed wire fence. Had his arm, and this is pretty graphic, had his arm out the window. He was like a good old boy. He was smoking a cigarette.
Right.
As he went through the barbed wire fence, barbed wire caught his arm and pulled it off. Pulled it off.
Yep.
The police officer got there within minutes, saved the guy's life. I mean, the guy would have bled out within minutes
Oh, yeah.
of that accident.
For sure.
And that guy drums for Def Leppard now.
And now that guy drums for Def Leppard. And if I knew the Def Leppard's drummer's name, I would have completed the circle.
Rick Allen.
Rick Allen, yeah. No, he doesn't drum for Def Leppard. But anyway, the point being is that time is so sensitive in those situations.
Right.
And we're learning more and more about that. And the departments that are doing this sort of thing, obviously the bigger cities, as you mentioned, they have the budgets to provide this type of equipment, but those smaller departments don't, and that's what we're talking about.
Right. Or larger departments that have a limited budget. They can get tourniquets out, but the training gear that they could use, they're not, and I'm not bashing heads of agencies. I mean, they have really tough decisions to make, right, as far as how they spend their money. Not that it's all important, but it's at the end of the day, I mean, there's just not enough to go around. I mean, just period. So anything we can do to support them and their ability to, literally save lives. I mean, obviously, I want to get behind that. So that's why I like this organization.
So it's next Monday. Mm-hmm. You're doing it during my show. I noticed that, by the way. That's fine.
That's
I
didn't plan this,
good.
right?
Yeah, that's all good. And how can people sign up? Do you have a website?
The easiest is copsdirect.org. They can go there and click on events, and they can register right there.
Please give to this wonderful organization. Any friend of Brink's is a friend of mine, and they're doing good work all over the country.
Yep. They're nationwide. This is their first kind of event in this area, so we want to support them.
And hopefully you can show some love to some of the Covenant families, too, in the meantime.
I'm waiting to hear back on that. Yep.
While I have you here, may I ask a couple of other unrelated questions?
I know you're going to.
Well, may I? Why am I
You love it.
So I brought this case up, and I noticed that it piqued your interest. And I'm just curious, generally, this is a court that went to the 11th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals. And in the 11th U.S. Circuit, a three-judge panel ruled in favor of a mechanic who sued the Huntsville Police Department and specifically two police officers for false arrest. And they wrote an opinion this week that says that Alabamians, and by extension Americans, are not required to show identification when asked by police unless certain, mental boxes can be checked by the arresting officers or the individuals on scene. What was was there a demarcation? Was there something that triggered in you, okay, I'm legally allowed to get this guy's identification and I'm going to escalate until I figure out who this person is? Or was it a feel thing? Is the law specific for you as a police officer as to when you can and when you cannot?
The law is specific, but the as far as what the terminology is, but as far as how that's described is vague. And what I mean by that is like a Terry stop. Okay, a Terry stop is when an officer has the ability to stop you, right? Whether you're walking, whatever, but the officer has to be able to articulate a reasonable suspicion that criminal activity is afoot, right? So that's the standard.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it's not just, I thought he was suspicious. Why? You have to be able to articulate that. And they drill this in Metro Police Academy. You get like the equivalent of a year of law school in 12 weeks. I mean, it is just crazy.
Mm-hmm.
But that was probably my favorite part of the academy. I was fascinated by the law. Well, in the case we're talking about, and we don't have to go way off into the weeds, but officers show up because a guy calls in and says these guys are messing with a car, and he gets there. They get there and they have the ability pretty quickly by the conversation with the quote unquote suspect to figure out that there's not any kind of criminal activity. He says, call this woman whose car I'm working on. She will, and so I don't know how you articulate that you suspected criminal activity was afoot. And there have been several Supreme Court rulings that say the call itself, right? Like the 911 call, the 862-8600 call, whatever, that by itself is not reasonable suspicion. So if you call me, you call the cops right now and say there's a guy sitting out front that looks suspicious, and now he's walking away from his car. That does not give me a police officer. That does not rise to the level of reasonable suspicion, just the call itself. I mean, there's been case after case about that. So, this one's about qualified immunity, though, right? I mean,
what would you advise? Like, if I get stopped by a police officer, let's say it's not in my vehicle, because if you're in a vehicle and you get pulled over, that in and of itself gives the officer has the opportunity to make sure that you are licensed to drive.
Correct.
And so you have to present a driver's license to make sure that you're not a threat to other people on the roadways. That makes sense.
Sure.
But if I'm just walking down the road, what's a good rule of thumb? Because, some people want, I don't want to cause trouble with the police, but at the same time, I have a respect for, and I want that respect to come back to me for constitutional rights and liberties. So what should I, if I'm a citizen, if I feel like, hey, I don't need to show this police officer my ID, he's asking for my ID, I haven't done anything wrong, would the question be, officer, what do you suspect that I'm doing that is criminally, what would your question be?
So the problem with it is you as a citizen are not going to know everything that law enforcement's been told, right? So, for example, let's say you're wearing an orange and white striped shirt, like something pretty unique, right?
Okay.
And so we just had, a robbery 3 blocks away, somebody fitting your description, orange and white striped shirt.
Sure.
You're not going to know, as Matt Murphy, that just happened. So is that your proximity to the crime, your description, is that enough for reasonable suspicion? Absolutely.
Okay.
But you're not going to know that, and there's no requirement that they tell you that, right? They don't have to tell you just specifics of what they know. So,
but typically the interaction, if it goes well, not interrupt your train of thought here, but if it goes well is you say, hey, stop for a second, I need to talk to you. I start talking to you. You say, I need to see some ID. I say, nah, dude, you don't need to see my ID. I'm just walking down the street. Typically, at that point, I would expect an officer would say, look, we had some stuff going on nearby. The person matches your description. I just want to clear you out and we'll get you out of here. That's what you hope would. And then I go, okay, fine. And I give you my ID and we go our merry ways. But the trouble is, what is reasonable? It's the language like reasonable, right? What is reasonable suspicion that I have been involved in this commission of a crime or whatnot? Right.
And so my advice would be this: if it's not a huge burden to you for whatever reason, and it's not, you're not in some sort of hurry, then you just never know what they've been told. You know what I mean? So automatically it puts them on guard. If you're like, you know what, I'm not going to give you my ID, man. Like, well, as a police officer, our thought is, what are you hiding?
Well, your immediate thought is, why not? And so it's all about attitude to me.
Sure.
Because if both of us have a good attitude about the whole thing, I think it could be resolved easily. But at some point I might say, because I don't have to, dude. Yeah. I've not done anything wrong. And then
that's the libertarian in you.
That's exactly right. But but I also understand that once we start down that road, if I see that look in the police officer's eyes, then I know that I got to go. It's all or nothing at this point, because he's probably going to get his way in this moment. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And then is it worth, right?
And is it worth all of that?
Yeah. And I think that's that guy that we're talking about in that case. I think that's exactly where he was. He was in a hurry. He was stressed out, whatever. He didn't have time to mess with showing those guys his ID because he's trying to fix this woman's car and it's late and everything else. But, and so, I see how from just a regular everyday standpoint, people would be like, man, I don't have time for that. But if you do have time and it's not a huge deal, then, it also puts them at ease a little bit too. So like, obviously I'm a former cop and I support the cops. Anything I can do, like if I get pulled over, for example, and it's at night, I roll down all my windows and I turn my interior lights on and put my hands on the steering wheel. Mm-hmm. You think I'm doing that just because I feel like it? No, it's because I want him to feel comfortable, right? I know that job, right? And I know how much crap they go through and how nobody calls the cops because they're having a good day. So anything I can do to make their job easier, I want to do it.
By the way, what's the good rule? You mentioned rolling down the windows and keeping the arms, the hands, obviously hands visible.
Yep.
It's probably not a good rule of thumb. You tell me if I'm wrong. To before the cop gets, like my my insurance is over here in the glove box. My driver's license is maybe in the middle console in my wallet, whatever. It's probably not a good idea to start rifling through your stuff before the police officer gets there, right? It would be my inclination to, I want to have all that ready.
Yeah, don't do that.
Because he doesn't know what you're doing.
It just makes it harder.
Or she.
Right. Yeah. Because, we need to see your hands. So that's the easiest rule of thumb, day or night. I mean, the only thing I would say is if it's at night, definitely put your windows down and interior lights on where they can see in your vehicle. And that's going to make them feel more comfortable. And I'll tell you, people that would do that for me, like when I pulled them over, I could unless they almost murdered some lady driving down the street, I wasn't going to write you a ticket because you went out of your way to make me feel comfortable.
No, it puts the interaction in a good, positive footing.
Yep, 1,000%.
Now, I may have asked you this question before, but I'll ask it again for the edification of the audience. Is if I have a gun in the car, right? And if you, by the way, if the police pull me over, 99% of the time, I'm going to have a gun in the car. Do I ignore that? Do I acknowledge it when he comes up to me or she comes up to me? What do you think is a best practice in terms of people who are carrying in their vehicles to make the police officer feel at ease?
So that varies by officer. So I can only give you my opinion. I'd listen, most cops are, I would say almost all, we're all about more good guys with guns. That's helpful, right? It would make me more nervous if you told me that right up front. Hey, I got a gun in here. Like, and unless
it's visible. I mean, if it's a visible and accessible, because
or if they're gonna get you out of the car for some reason, or if it leads to where they're gonna search your car, at that point say, hey, by the way, I just want you to know there's a firearm in here, or I have a firearm on me. How would you like for me to proceed? If they're gonna get you out of the car, if they're not gonna see it, and just why even like
bring it up? Why escalate?
I mean, that was me. That was me personally, because so civilians with guns are all over the place. Because some of them want to show you their gun, and they
hey man,
yeah, it's like that's a great way to get yourself shot,
and for me, and I don't want to get too specific here, but my firearm is accessible to me as I'm driving my vehicle, right? Same. So if in that respect, it is potentially visible to the police officer who's looking into my window. And so I want to, it's that balance of I want to be on the up and up. I want to make sure he knows, hey, everything's okay. At the same time, bringing it up could be a red flag too.
Well, if you think he might see it, then tell him. I mean, hands on the steering wheel and say, hey,
by the way, I got
officer,
one.
I have a firearm. It's on my right hip in a holster. How would you like for me to proceed? Just
that's good
leave
stuff.
it at that.
That's good stuff.
Yeah.
All right. Speaking of good stuff, give me the website one more time to get in on this golf tournament that's happening on October 9th. That's next Monday at, you said Hermitage Golf?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
It's copsdirect.org, and then just click on events, and then you'll be able to sign up right there.
Love it. Thank you, man.
Yeah,
I appreciate you.
Appreciate
There's Brink Fiddler, defendsystems.com, by the way, for those who are interested in finding out more about Brink and what he does on a regular basis at 53 after the hour on Super Talk. Tennessee Men's Clinic. I went by the shop today just to check out how things are going in the Midtown location. Things are going great. They've got more and more appointments signing up in the Franklin location. Actually, Franklin is approaching the Midtown numbers in terms of how many appointments they're scheduling on a regular basis, and that's a great thing. More and more men are recognizing they need to keep up with their men's health. And if you have felt sluggish or run down, if you feel a lack of energy or motivation, if you don't want to go to the gym, if you don't feel like working out in the yard, if for whatever reason your lifestyle has changed in a significant way, if you're feeling tired or grumpy, if you've noticed weight gain, you need to get to the Tennessee Men's Clinic. Let them check out those numbers. It doesn't cost an arm and a leg, less than $100 in most cases, and you will have results the day that you walk into the shop. 615-208-9090. That's 208-9090, or go to TennesseeMen'sClinic.com. That's TennesseeMen'sClinic.com for the Tennessee Men's Clinic.
Hey folks, Paul Winkler here. When we get to retirement, what do we want to do? We want to go and kick back, right? But we also want to take an income from our investment portfolios. And there are a lot of common myths that I hear about how do you take an income from an investment portfolio. One is that people will get into, this was really big a few years ago, really big, real estate investment trust. Now, real estate gets rented and it kicks off an income, and then you have some kind of dividend that's paid, and because the REIT has to pay out most of the dividend, it's a great way to take income in retirement. But what happens, like what happened recently, when all of a sudden the properties go unrented? What happens to your income? Bye-bye, it's gone. Another thing that I see is this: people buy stocks or stock mutual funds that are dividend paying, and what we'll do is we'll live off the dividends. Well, what is the dividend? It's part of the earnings of the company. So you got the earnings of the company, right? And then what happens is the company may pay out some of the dividend, and they call that a dividend when they pay it out, or they may retain some of it, and it's called retained earnings. Well, the problem is this: what if the company's earnings go down? Just like the real estate investment trust up here, what if the earnings go down? What happens to your dividend? It goes away. All of a sudden, it's bye-bye to your retirement income. So what do we want to do? We want to diversify way better. If you look at the academic research on investing and how to take income from a portfolio, quite often what it is saying, okay, I'm going to have some money in various asset classes. Large companies, small companies, value companies, growth companies, international companies, short-term bonds and intermediate bonds, and so on and so forth. And what I do is I look at these different areas of the market, and they have a historic return. And what happens if the portfolio does, this area of the market does better than this one? Well, in that particular year,
from
I'm going to
ABC
take income
News,
from this
I'm Michelle
part of the
Franzen.
portfolio.
Embattled GOP
Then
House
the
Speaker
next year,
Kevin
maybe
McCarthy
this area
faced
does
with an
better than
ouster vote.
everything else.
Hardline
I'll take
Republicans
income from
leading the
there.
charge after McCarthy worked with Democrats to avert a government shutdown, and there is little goodwill left across the aisle.
In a letter to colleagues, House Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries says Kevin McCarthy has too often yielded to Republican extremists, and as a result, top Democrats will vote in favor of Matt Gaetz's motion to vacate the speakership. While McCarthy has been confident he'd win such a vote, urging opponents to bring it, he's now hinting he sees the writing on the wall.
If 5 Republicans go with Democrats, then I'm out.
If Gaetz's effort is successful, it would be the first time in history that the House will have voted to oust a sitting speaker. Stephen Portnoy, ABC News, Washington.
In Delaware today, Hunter Biden pleaded not guilty to felony gun-related charges. That after a previous plea deal with special counsel prosecutors fell apart. ABC's Mary Bruce says President Biden is not commenting on his son's case.
The president has long stressed the importance of the independence of the Justice Department. He doesn't want to do or say anything that would add fuel to the Republican claims that the president has somehow been manipulating this entire process. And we have, heard them stress that he hasn't been in any kind of contact with the Attorney General over any of this, and the Attorney General backs that up.
An investigation underway in a deadly military training accident that occurred in Alaska.
A U.S. Army vehicle flipped over in the Yukon training area in Alaska. 2 service members were killed, 12 more injured. They were in a light-medium tactical vehicle known as an LMTV. It had 17 soldiers in it in a remote area. Those inside had to be extricated and evacuated to Fairbanks for medical treatment. The Yukon training area is about 257,000 acres in size, about 30 miles from Fort Wainwright. Alex Stone, ABC News.
On Wall Street, stocks tumbling today over concerns another rate hike could come. You're listening to ABC News.
All right, all eyes are on Washington, D.C. right now. There is a vote going on, a motion to vacate offered by Representative Matt Gaetz of Florida. That happened yesterday. There is a vote happening now, key vote as to whether or not to keep Kevin McCarthy as Speaker of the House. That's on the House side of things. And obviously, this is the result of a deal that was attempted to be brokered by Kevin McCarthy and the other Republicans to push. Obviously, they were not able to get their appropriations bill finalized by September 30th, the end of the fiscal year. They wanted to push a stopgap measure, call it a continuing resolution, call it whatever you want. Several hardliners in the House of Representatives refused to do that, forcing Kevin McCarthy to rely on certain Democrat votes in order to get that accomplished, which pushed the same hardliners, specifically Matt Gaetz, to offer a motion to vacate. We now know that Tim Burchett is planning on, if he's not already, voting in favor of that. All of the Democrats are expected to, or at least most are expected to vote in that manner. Obviously, that's in the House side, but I'm certain that our next guest has a thought or two about the push, the 45-day push to get things over to the Senate side of things. Her name is Senator Marsha Blackburn. We are pleased and honored to have her join us this afternoon on the Matt Murphy Show to talk about these and other matters happening in Washington, D.C. Senator, good afternoon. Hope you're well.
I am doing well. Thank you so much. And yes, we are in D.C. and we are encouraging the Senate to move forward on our appropriations bills. The good thing is the Senate has moved these out of the Appropriations Committee, and they're ready to go to the floor. But as you know, Matt, all the funding measures need to originate in the House and then come to the Senate in order for the Senate to take them up. So we want them to get busy to get all of these done. We want to be able to do some spending cuts, and as your listeners know, every year that I was in the state Senate and then in the U.S. House and here in the Senate, I offer legislation that would be a 1%, a 2%, or a 5% across the board cut. And I fully believe that any agency can find a way to save a penny out of a dollar. They ought to be able to do that. And if they did that every year for 10 years, it would be amazing how much of the taxpayer money that they could save.
Senator, the frustration that I hear from Middle Tennessee revolves around an inability on the part of the House, and they're not blaming the Senate body. I mean, you guys were ready to receive these appropriations bills, obviously, and those that you have, you just mentioned, you're working them. And that is with the Democrat, I would note, that's with the Democrat majority. It's a fine split, but that's with the Democrat majority in the Senate. The frustration that I hear, and you were a part of this body prior to being a United States Senator, was the idea that they didn't see the urgency back in August. And I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on this, and is there a better way to handle this year to year to get back to a sense of regular order?
Well, I think a couple of things would help. Every year I have supported a balanced budget amendment, balancing the budget without a tax increase. That would be a good thing so that people realize you've got to construct this document. And once the president presents his document, he's supposed to do it in February. He did not do it this year until April. But people need to be working on this to meet that responsibility to fund the government. The second thing is regular order is very good on this. And since this is a requirement of Congress, they need to be starting on these committee hearings to authorize in January and February and not waiting until April and May to start this. Regular order would go a long way to putting the parameters in place to actually cut into that baseline. There is another concept that I'm a big believer in, and it is zero-based budgeting, which would require every department every year to start with a clean sheet of paper and a fresh pencil and put down what they need, not what they want, and not look at how much baseline budgeting, Matt, allows them to say, last year we got $100. This year, we're going to ask for $110. And then it comes back, they get $105. And what do they run out and say? Oh, you cut
our spending. That's right.
Yeah, we didn't cut anything. You got $5 more than you got last year. That is called an increase. So if you had to have zero-based budgeting, you would not be able to do that, because every year you would have to start over from zero and look at things that have outlived their usefulness, look at places of employment and positions that have outlived their usefulness, and just like a company does, decide what is going to need more attention and what needs less, and where you can actually use technology and achieve efficiencies and save some money.
Final thought on this budgeting process, and then I want to ask you one question about the Department of Health and Human Services, very important one considering what's going on the southern border. You voted no on the stopgap, on the 45-day stopgap, and I just want you to talk to Tennessee and explain why you were a no vote.
I was a no vote because I feel like the House had not done their job getting things to us. The Senate was ready to move forward, as we discussed. And the other thing is we've got $33 trillion in debt. Through COVID, this spending has just run off the rails. It has been nonstop. And for the sake of our children and grandchildren, we have got to get this under control. The interest on the debt is an increasing expense. You don't want to make it so high that kids and grandkids can't afford to live. And we know inflation is just killing people. If you want to get inflation under control, what is the number one thing every economist will tell you? You have to reduce federal spending. And we had the chance to reduce that federal spending and do something about the border. And nothing on those two issues got done.
Speaking of the border, you're demanding some transparency and honesty from the Department of Health and Human Services. Talk to me about, we heard a good bit from the liberal media regarding, separation of children from adults to make sure that these adults were these children's parents on the southern border during the Trump administration. We're hearing nothing about that now because they want to dismiss this mistreatment of some 85,000 missing migrant children. Talk to me about that.
Yes, and indeed, I've got two pieces of legislation. First of all, requiring them to reinstate the DNA testing at the southern border. We found out that a third of those kids coming to the border were being trafficked. Also, and this is what I've been on since March with HHS and their Office of Refugee Resettlement, there are 300,000 unaccompanied alien children that have come in on Joe Biden's watch. The Health and Human Services and Office of Refugee Resettlement and Department of Homeland Security cannot find 85,000 of those children. They have been turned over to sponsors that were selected, and by the way, they had loosened the vetting requirements and made it easier for people to apply and to be approved. They cannot find these children. They do not know if they're dead or alive. They do not know if they're working in drug trafficking, if they're linked onto gangs, if they are being forced into sex trafficking. And the fact that they cannot find them, I brought up this to Secretary Becerra and asked for his response. I cited a New York Times article. There's a reporter there that has been following this issue. They have found children that are working in factories, children that are working in meat processing plants, and are working in food processing, and they cannot find these children, and they cannot find the sponsors. And we have got to have them step up. I did not get an answer in committee. I wrote him a letter. They wrote me back about 6 weeks later with some insufficient answers, but never addressed the problem. So I've written them again. What are they doing to locate these children that they turned over to federal government selected sponsors and approved by the Office of Refugee Resettlement, and now they have no clue where these children are located. And we're going to stay on this. This is a humanitarian crisis. You have that border wide open, record numbers, and it is the Biden border policy, and where these children, minors, have gone, they cannot tell you, and they are not working to find them.
Senator, thank you so much for your time today. We always appreciate it. Thank you for your work on this southern border issue, specifically with HHS. We appreciate you, and we look forward to a new conversation. I promise to get you out at 15. I'm only a minute late, Senator, so that's
you got it.
That's
Take
good.
Care,
all right,
Matt.
take care. There's Marsha Blackburn joining us for a few moments, giving her thoughts on her no vote. Right now, the House is voting. I have no idea where we are in the process, and it's incredibly confusing. Right now, we are voting on agreeing to the resolution, whatever that means. So I know that we're in the process of figuring out whether or not Kevin McCarthy will be the Speaker of the House moving forward. Bell Kay and I were discussing this, and I frankly don't know the answer, and I should, but I don't. So what happens next? Well, common sense dictates. So when they figure out their Speaker at the beginning of a session, they do so before the session starts, technically. The first order of business, before they go into the 115th Congress, or whatever the hell it is this time around, 17th, I don't know. They figure out who the Speaker of the House is, who the leader of the body is going to be. It can be anyone. It could be Bell. It could be me. It could be you. Although I seriously doubt it will be any of those three. They figure out the speakership first, and it is determined by a majority of the body present. But now they're in session. So it's my understanding that as they determine who the Speaker is going to be, they are making that determination as they are setting up the rules of the incoming session. So they're really doing all of this prior to the session happening. But now we're in session. So the question becomes, what can they do without a Speaker? And the obvious answer to me is nothing. So if they vote to oust Speaker Kevin McCarthy, then the next thing they have to do is figure out who's going to be a Speaker. Meantime, tick-tock, 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 45 days, tick-tock, 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 tick-tock. So every day that we're trying to figure out who the Speaker is going to be, and by the way, it took 15 votes last time around? And while I appreciate the chaos that this presents, and I appreciate the frustration, and I appreciate the fact that you and I and just about every other common sense American that is aware of this situation is wondering why the hell they didn't stick around in August to get this job done, why we would need the extra 45 days to begin with. So we appreciate the frustration on the part of these folks. There's no end game here. There's zero end game. Nobody knows what's going to happen, which I kind of like. It's actually kind of exciting.
The ironic thing to me is that the reason it took 15 votes was because they were trying to force him to promise to do the things he's refused to do, over which they're trying to oust him now.
Right. And part of what they wanted a promise on that he agreed to become Speaker was to give them a minimal amount of individuals that could vote to vacate the chair. In other words, one member brings it up, and he is required to bring that up to a vote. He agreed on that rule. Well, he's abiding by that agreement now. So it only takes 5 Republicans. And by the way, Andy Ogles has now declared himself. I'll read you this in just a moment. Tim Burchett, I'll let you hear from Tim Burchett in just a moment. We have at least 2 House of Representative members that are saying that they will vote to oust Kevin McCarthy as Speaker of the House.
That's in addition to Matt Gaetz?
Well, yeah, no, they already had the 5. Andy Biggs has already agreed to it. I have the.
Oh, so now we're just waiting to find out how many Democrats are available.
Right. Oh, they have the amount of Republicans that are needed. The question is, do enough Democrats show up and vote with those Republicans to give them the majority to boot Kevin McCarthy? In a moment, I'll tell you what Andy Ogle said about the situation, and we're anticipating a call from Andy at some point over the course of the day, although votes are going on right now, so that call's probably going to be a little bit delayed. It's 1:20 on Super Talk 99.7. Your calls, though, where are you on this? Are you happy that this is not the same old, same old? Are you disappointed that there's chaos in the Republican-led House of Representatives? Are you, like me, a fan of the chaos? Because you know what we didn't have for 25 years? Chaos. You know, also know what we didn't have? A balanced budget or anything close to it. We had overspending, overspending, overspending. Well, it is going to take action like this to upset the apple cart. That's what it takes to drain the swamp. To drain the swamp. And you know what? I like what Matt Gaetz does. I don't like him that much. I think he's kind of a tool. I mean, I do. He's a toolbox. And he acts like a toolbox. But you know what? I'm a toolbox on occasion. So I get it. It would be a lot easier if he were a little more likable, but I do like what he's doing. What say you? 615-737-9986 as we continue on the Matt Murphy Show on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Super Talk 99.7 WTN 125. Good afternoon. Welcome. If you're just joining us, thank you for being here. Where you been? We're almost halfway done. We're almost to halftime. Not exactly at halftime on Capitol Hill. I do not know where we are. I don't think this is the final vote. There will be another vote to oust Speaker Kevin McCarthy. This vote is agreeing to the resolution, which I think would get us to the final vote. There's no time remaining in that vote, and that vote has passed 218 to 170 or thereabouts. So I think we're getting to the point where we're about to vote on whether or not Kevin McCarthy will remain Speaker of the House. This is virtually, if it's not unprecedented, it's been a long, long time since there's been any sort of vote to oust the Speaker. I don't know that this has ever happened in American history.
It is unprecedented.
I mean, so you have the motion to vacate. A lot of representatives are getting in line and explaining their votes, to include several amongst the Tennessee delegation. Let's hear from Representative Tim Burchett, who was on our show yesterday and expressed that he had a lot of trepidations about where he was going with his vote, but he has finally made a decision, and he announced that decision on social media on the application formerly known as Twitter. And here's what he had to say.
Hey, everybody. Tim Burchett. Today will be a vote on motion to vacate the chair, which is the speakership. And my thought process is like this. Kevin McCarthy's my friend, and I hate to lose him as a friend, but I had a choice between that and my conscience and what my conscience tells me to do. My conscience tells me that we're $33 trillion in debt. We took off the whole month of August knowing that September was going to come around. It does every year, the end of our budgetary year, fiscal year, and there is no urgency. And then we just do a continued resolution, kicking the can 45 days down the road, and then that will be right up against the Thanksgiving holiday, and then we'll put in an omnibus, which is a big bill. It's more spending, more grease, more lobbyists, and more special interest, and the big boys will stay in power. And at some point, we just got to say enough is enough, folks. I hate losing Kevin as a friend, but I worry about losing our country.
All right, so there he is. There's another minute or so of that, but a little bit difficult to hear. He was standing outside of the United States Capitol when he was filming that with the Capitol Rotunda in the background. So Representative Tim Burchett announces that he is voting to vacate. He is voting to remove Kevin McCarthy as Speaker of the House of Representatives. I don't know that Representative Andy Ogles presented a video clip. At least I've not seen it, but he did present this statement that I will read to you. Since arriving in Congress in January, I've dedicated myself to voting uncompromisingly according to my conscience and working in the best interest of the people of Tennessee's 5th District. There have been several tough calls during my tenure, but I've never made a decision haphazardly. Currently, America stands at a significant crossroads. Washington is undergoing some of the most substantial growing pains in its history. However, business cannot continue as usual. At this precise moment, I am uncertain about how I will vote regarding vacating. Well, this is stupid. I haven't read this. This is all right. I'm uncertain about how I will vote regarding vacating Speaker McCarthy. Still, I understand the sentiments of my colleagues leading the charge. Our country has a $33 trillion debt with no end in sight. Instead of working through August to address it, current leadership sent us home. As a result, the House passed a terrible continuing resolution to maintain the status quo. While it's usually unwise to replace a coach mid-game, today's decision demands careful consideration due to its significant ramifications. The decision I ultimately make will be one I genuinely believe is in the best interest of the American people and the future of our country. So, I mean, no disrespect to Andy intended here when I say that was just a bunch of nothing that I did not pre-read because it just came down minutes ago. So Burchett says he's voting to vacate. That would put the number at least 5, if not 6 or 7.
CNN had 6 different senators, 6 different congressmen that have already said they will vote to vacate.
So that's enough if all the Democrats are present. So the Democrats could save him either through no votes. the presumption is that all the Democrats will vote in favor of ousting Kevin McCarthy. And leadership has come out and said that they will be voting to oust Kevin McCarthy. So the House is set to vote shortly. If Speaker Kevin McCarthy is removed today, then who knows who will be Speaker after today? What's the best guess? Jordan?
Yeah, that's my knee-jerk reaction is Jordan.
And I don't think he wants it, but that's what I think will happen.
If we have no speaker, are they still able to go on recess for the weekend?
I'm on record as saying that if they go home, I'm on record as saying if they go home, Speaker's got to go. Well, if Speaker goes, they don't go home, I would think. The only thing they can do if they have no Speaker is vote on a Speaker. And at the point that if they determine to oust Kevin McCarthy, which is still very much up in the air, then I think they have to stick around until they figure something out. It's kind of like the Pope. Until you see white smoke, you got to stay there. Isn't that how they do the Pope? Isn't it white smoke, black smoke?
Mm-hmm.
Is it white smoke or black?
White smoke is the new Pope. Black smoke is we're still voting.
Yeah, yeah. And they got to stay like in the room until they finish their job. I assume they have bathrooms in there. Well, just lock them in the Speaker's office and figure it out. So House Resolution 757 resolved that the office of Speaker of the House of Representatives hereby declared to be vacant. Resolution qualifies as a question of the privilege of the House. So they have set up the question, and we are now preparing to vote. We'll get to the vote in just a moment. We might actually tilt over to C-SPAN, believe it or not. It's the most interesting thing to come out of C-SPAN in Washington, D.C. in a long, long time. 132 on Super Talk. Hey, folks, 218. That's the weight last time I got on the scale. 218 pounds. That is down from 253 pounds. And I have PhD weight loss to thank for all of this. The program is so simple to understand, and it's simple to implement. And that is very important to me because I'm a simple guy, right? I don't need complex tabulations. I don't want to have to keep count of calories and all that sort of thing. You don't have to do any of that with PhD Weight Loss. What you need to do is go online to myphdweightloss.com. That's myphdweightloss.com. It has made such a difference in my life. I feel better. I get compliments. I got complimented just this morning. I walked through the lower level of our friendly studios here at Cumulus Nashville, and somebody said, man, I haven't seen you in a while. You've lost some weight. And I said, thank you very much. Thank you, PhD Weight Loss. I appreciate you, Dr. Ashley Lucas. This nutrition system works. You get coaching on a weekly basis. Most men lose between 3 and 5 pounds a week. Women lose between 2 and 3 pounds a week. And don't forget about the PhD guarantee. PhD Weight Loss guarantees if you don't get within 5 pounds of your target weight by the end of your program, they will continue to coach you for free until you do. Can't ask for more than that. myphdweightloss.com. That's myphdweightloss.com. Super Talk 99.7 WTN. What happens next? I don't know. Right now, we're watching a vote. I think I understand where we are in the order of all of this now. I think I've caught up to speed. By the way, it's the Matt Murphy Show, Super Talk 99.7 WTN 137. So there is currently a vote being taken to table or to kill the motion to remove Representative Kevin McCarthy as the Speaker. So someone motioned to kill this measure that was originally brought up by Matt Gaetz. And they're voting on whether or not to kill the measure or to table the motion. And right now, the yays are leading 202 to 154, but 10 Republicans have voted nay to kill it. So that if the nays have this vote, and there's about 9 minutes left in the vote, if the nays win this vote, then it will go on to the actual vote to remove Kevin McCarthy for Speaker. It's a lot of procedural action going on, but there's, I motion to table, I motion to kill the measure. So right now there is a table motion in place. Already 10 Republicans have voted against the motion to table this proposal, the proposal being to remove Kevin McCarthy. So as soon as this vote finishes up, we'll get to the real vote as to whether or not Kevin McCarthy will continue as Speaker. Your thoughts on this? 615-737-9986. The question then is, what happens after that? I'm a little and look, Andy and I buried the hatchet to a certain degree, but I'm a bit disappointed in Representative Ogles that he could not, an hour before the vote is to be taken, tell us how he's going to vote. That's a little bit odd. Tim Burchett did. Now, I've not heard from other representatives, so I'll give him a bit of the benefit of the doubt. 3704 said, you had Andy pegged to right. What a joke, seeing what kind of deal he can get. When he was so against McCarthy in the beginning, call his bleep out. Go back to not liking him. Well, I just, it's not a matter of whether I like Andy or not. It's a matter of whether I believe he's doing a good job or not. And I think he's done a pretty good job up until now. I don't like that he did not declare where he was on this, but maybe he'll declare on our show. He's certainly going to declare in a minute, because right now we're looking at a vote of this is a vote to kill the motion to remove Kevin McCarthy. This is the final procedural vote before the actual vote whether or not to remove him. And right now, yay to kill the motion, 203. Nay is 196. 197, and 33 people have not voted yet, including 8 Republicans and 25 Democrats. So if all of the Democrats...
What channel are you on?
I'm on C-SPAN.
You're like 7 votes ahead of me.
Yeah, I'm on... I moved to... Are you on hashtag Never CNN?
Yes.
Yeah, I moved to C-SPAN just because I couldn't handle I wasn't even listening to the commentators, but just looking at them made me angry. And I'm, no, can't handle it. Move on to C-SPAN, baby. Just the nattering nabobs of negativism. Isn't that what Spiro Agnew called them?
I love the alliteration there.
Oh, no, I think it's Spiro Agnew that called the mainstream media nattering nabobs of negativism. That's what the stupid people on hashtag Never CNN are. I watch CNN so you don't have to. So, you got to upset the apple cart. Are you with me? Keith says they've got 9 minutes left. I like that. That's what you get for reading text live. Keith said, they got 9 minutes left. Plenty of time to pull the fire alarm. Where's old Javal when you need him? 5925 says, I'm 100% with you, Matt. We have to upset the apple cart. If it wasn't for McCarthy I wasn't from McCarthy from the start, but I thought we'd give him a try. I did too. And for me, it is nothing more nor less than his willingness to let them leave in August. You clearly do not see the urgency here. You know what they voted on yesterday? You know what they spent time on yesterday? They haven't passed all these appropriations bills. They went into session and they voted to name a post office. They're naming.
And you were criticizing him for not taking care of the big issues.
I know. And look at me. Look at me now. How embarrassed am I? While I sit here wagging my finger and criticizing them, they're getting the hard work done of getting that post office named after somebody that you've never heard of.
How are people supposed to find the post office to mail their mail if it doesn't have a name?
Headless Bells Post Office.
Right.
Right here in Madison, Tennessee.
Because you can't just say, where's the post office?
You got to name it. I get it. I understand. That's the hard work, right? All right, so right now the nays have won out 214 to 206. 13 individuals. Well, I guess they haven't won out quite yet. You got 13 people yet to vote, and the nays need like 3 more or 4 more votes. Oh, they only need 3 now. They're to 215. There's still 4 minutes left, so I assume people could change their votes if they wanted to. Let's talk to you on the phones. Charles is first up in Estelle Springs. Hey, Charles, how are you?
Hey, Matt, can you walk me through? I guess my fundamental question is this. If I'm a Democrat, why would I not vote to support McCarthy? Because I'm keeping somebody in office that will work with the Democrats and cater to them to a certain extent. Is that not, am I not right there?
Well, I think that's been overstated by some of the hardliners to some degree. Kevin McCarthy is more of a moderate than some of the hardliners, but here's the answer to the question. They're not going to do it right now. They might do it in a little bit. They might do it after a week. They might do it after several votes. But what they're trying to highlight, like it or not, they're trying to show that the Republicans are completely dysfunctional. And in order to do that, if you vote to oust McCarthy on the front end, and then you can always go back and let McCarthy have some of your votes on the back end to put him back in the speaker's chair. Does that make sense?
It does. I mean, but to me, you know, he's always flip-flopped and works with Mitch McConnell, who I think is the prototypical rhino.
Agreed.
I want to know how to upset that apple cart and get him gone. But I just think the Democrats are going to support him because they know what they've got.
Well, they may support him eventually, but what they're going to do is maximize the amount of pain. See, they don't care about the American people. They don't care about government shutdowns. Plus, the more time they waste on this speaker vote, the closer we get to Thanksgiving, the closer we get to running out of the clock on the 45 days. And if we run the clock out on the 45 days, then that gets them closer to an omnibus spending bill that they like, full of their goodies, without any ability for the Republicans to push back.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So yeah, they're running out the clock. Thank you, Charles, for the call. I mean, yeah, the Democrats, they prefer McCarthy over a hardliner. Yeah. So the vote, you know, there's still 2 minutes for people to change their votes. But on the motion to table the move to vacate Kevin McCarthy, that motion to table has failed. So we will move on now, one would presume, to a vote of the body to either oust or keep McCarthy. Here's my prediction. Let's go ahead and make it with a couple of minutes before this vote is set to get underway. And I might get you. Are you on C-SPAN now?
No, I don't know what channel that is.
Get over to, let me tell you. Get over to channel 7 because I'm going to ask you to, when the sergeant at arms or whoever it is, the clerk of the, I guess it's the clerk of the House, when they start
JIP.
When they start talking, a little what now?
A little JIP.
Yeah, we're going to do a little JIP, a little JIP, a little joint in progress, because I think this is an important enough event that it merits that. We won't do that for the entirety of the vote, but when she starts talking about what they are preparing to do, we'll go there. JIP, joint in progress. Thank you, Godfather. So here's my prediction. The Democrats will join the hardliner Republicans, and they will oust Kevin McCarthy in order to embarrass him and to weaken him and to embarrass the Republicans. They will allow this to sit for a while. They will allow the Republicans to wallow for a while, despite the fact that the Republicans have the majority. Make no mistake, There is no other Republican, to my knowledge, in the House of Representatives that has enough votes to become Speaker, with the possible exception of Steve Scalise. But Steve Scalise is battling cancer right now. I think it's blood cancer, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe Jim Jordan, although Jim Jordan has quite a few detractors, believe it or not, as well, within the Republican Party. So there are precious few Republicans that could potentially challenge for the speakership and get all of the Republican votes. Being the case, one would presume that the Democrats will allow this to flounder around for a while and then demand concessions of Kevin McCarthy in order to give him enough votes to win re-election as Speaker. That's my prediction. So make of that what you will. When all is said and done, McCarthy is a weakened Speaker, but he probably returns to the Speaker's chair. And he probably has a bunch of names on a list of butts he wants to kick. But you know what? Kevin McCarthy did not have any cojones in August. Gates is talking right now. Well, let's see. Just join.
He just yielded time.
Yeah. This is Representative Good from Virginia. Yank this up and see. Let's join this in progress. All right, they're clearing the room. They're getting some decorum. They're getting the well cleared. Laying down the law. That's not Kevin McCarthy laying down the law. I don't know who that is. It's a representative of something, something, so-and-so. It's Representative so-and-so from somewhere.
I voted for him.
Oh, yeah. It looks distinguished. White hair. All right, so they're about to vote on the removal. All right, Representative Good. All right, so we'll allow this speech to be made, and we'll cover whatever he has to say on the other side of our timeout. Jeff and Phil, we'll get to you in just a moment. A historic vote is set to take place, and we're covering it for you live on Super Talk 99.7 WTN and the Matt Murphy Show. Back in a moment. Have you heard? Have you heard the news? Cooler conditions coming. Oh, Jeff Eddy called me last night to tell me all about it. I'm kidding. He didn't really, but I did hear about it on the Weather Channel. And the weather says cool conditions this weekend. That means for those of you who have taken my advice and you've already called Jeff Eddy, and he came out to your house, and Efficient Heating and Cooling took care of your business, and for a low-cost point, probably lower than the $125 max, but it's never over $125. They maintained your heating unit and made sure that everything's running as it should. And so you're A-OK. You're going to crank that heater up this weekend when it turns 47 or 46 degrees in the early morning hours, and you're A-OK. But if you've not done it, it's still time. Get with Jeff Eddy and Efficient Heating and Cooling. Let him come out. Best value around. They never charge you overtime on a service call, and on maintenance calls, never over $125, no matter how many units you might have to service at your residence. Jeff Eddy keeps the overhead down. He keeps your cost point down, your invoice down. Efficient Heating and Cooling, they offer free financing if the time has come for a new unit, and they're a diamond contractor with Mitsubishi Electric, as well as an elite pro partner with Rheem. EfficientHVAC.net or call 615-784-4424, 784-4424 for Efficient Heating and Cooling. Super Talk 99.7 WTN, listening to Representative Bob Good out of Virginia deliver a passionate defense of the possibility of removing Kevin McCarthy as Speaker of the House, suggesting that if not now, when? If you are going to acquiesce to the demands of the Democrats now against the possibility of shutting down the government for a temporary shutdown, and as Bob Good just mentioned, and I was listening to it during the break, you're talking about 15% max of the government shutting down. 15%. And with that in mind, if you're not willing to stop that, then perhaps you're not really a physical conservative, was his point. Not saying that I agree with that in its totality, but I understand the sentiment, certainly. In the meantime, your thoughts. I promised Jeff and Phil I'd get to you. Jeff, you're first up out of Pulaski. Hey, Jeff, how are you?
I'm fine, thanks. How are you?
I'm doing well. What's on your mind?
Well, I was listening to your conversation with Senator Blackburn, and a couple of times she made reference about saving the taxpayers' money, 1%, 2%, and 5%. And I'm just wondering if she does save taxpayer money like that, does that mean my taxes are going to go down, or is that just going to go somewhere else and my taxes are going to remain the same? So I'm busy. I'm going to get off here, and I'll tell you, I'll listen to your comment. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Jeff. I think what she was referring to is when she had an opportunity to vote on budgets, she voted on budgets that cut into the amount of money spent by the federal government. That does not mean, obviously, that your tax rates are going to fluctuate because the United States federal government overspends every single day, every single week, every single month, and every single year. Almost exclusively in my lifetime, they've overspent. I think there's only 1 or 2 years that you've seen a budgetary surplus in the 50 years that I've been on planet Earth. That's a sad testimony. So, no, unfortunately, the answer to your question is you would not see that money back, even if it passed, which it didn't, and it wouldn't. It is 1:59 on Super Talk 99.7 WT, and more of your calls and the big vote coming up next hour.
From ABC News, I'm Michelle Franzen. A vote to table the motion to remove GOP House Speaker Kevin McCarthy failing on the House floor moments ago. That opens the way for a full ouster vote to move forward. ABC's Catherine Folders is at the Capitol and says only 5 Republicans need to join Democrats in order to expel McCarthy.
We're up to 6 Republicans who have said that they are in favor of this motion to vacate. Those are Gates, of course, Biggs, Crane, Burchett, Good, and now Rosendale has come out in support of this. It's worth noting that even though there's only 6 of them, the majority of the conference still does support McCarthy, but Democrats sent a Dear Colleague letter from Leader Jeffries that said that they will vote yes on this motion to vacate.
That vote expected to happen this afternoon. In New York City, former President Trump back in court to hear testimony in his civil fraud trial. Trump, though, has been speaking outside the courtroom, defending himself against allegations his family company inflated the values of properties. ABC's Aaron Katursky is outside the courthouse.
He's been fighting the notion as his statements of financial condition, which have already by the judge been determined to be fraudulent. He says his statements came with a disclaimer that banks and lenders should have done due diligence, and he says the values that the Trump organization put on his properties were just fine. The way he sees it, he can value his properties whatever he thinks they're worth.
In Delaware today, Hunter Biden entering a plea of not guilty to federal firearm charges. His arraignment part of the special counsel's investigation and follows a failed plea agreement with prosecutors in July that fell apart. The Michigan Supreme Court has denied an appeal by the parents of the Oxford school shooter, claiming there was not enough evidence for them to stand trial. James and Jennifer Crumbly will now stand trial on charges related to the mass shooting, accused of buying the gun that their son used to kill 4 students in November of 2021. You're listening to ABC News.
Hello, it's hour number 3 of the Matt Murphy Show, Super Talk 99.7 WTN 205. Good afternoon. Thank you for being with us. Whatever time you're able to give us, we're certainly appreciative of that. We've got big goings-on in Washington, D.C. right now, unprecedented goings-on in Washington, D.C., and we're going to cover them for you like the morning dew across the state of Tennessee right now. Okay, so if you're just joining us, there is a debate going on right now whether to vacate the chair. It has passed all motions to kill it, and so we are currently debating on the floor of the House of Representatives in Washington, D.C., whether or not to remove Kevin McCarthy as Speaker of the House. What happens there and what happens after that in the 118th Congress is anyone's guess. Right now, you've got Tom Emmer, who is the majority whip, standing before the body and speaking. He is just finishing up his remarks. I was about to go to those remarks. Matt Gaetz is standing on the other side of the aisle, and I assume he's preparing to retort in some fashion. Go ahead and jip some of this. I think it's important enough that we do so. I can't believe I'm saying this, but some incredibly compelling stuff going on C-SPAN. Oh, Jim Jordan. None of those got past the Senate, by the way, but oh, there. At least he mentioned it. All right, so I want to come back here for just a moment, reset, and as time allows, we'll go back and forth to the floor of the House of Representatives during this hour. It is, while historic, it is dry. I mean, the business of government can often be dry, but Jim Jordan is bringing up the point and defending his man, Kevin McCarthy, for doing what he promised to do and committing to those promises. I would suggest that he's not fulfilled some of those promises as we are well on our way to heading toward an omnibus Senate package to be passed before House recess in, 44 days now? And frankly, the idea of going along to get along is long past, in my opinion. Now, I don't know what the end game is on this, but it's not for me to determine. Matt Gaetz is back at the podium. Let's flip back over here and see what he's saying. so much as he may consume. Uh-oh, he's a slow talker, too. This is, by the way, Representative Andy Biggs from Arizona, who is one of the members dedicated to voting against Kevin McCarthy as Speaker. All right, I'm going to bring it back here. No disrespect to Andy Biggs, and I wanted to keep it there while he was talking about that fine officer out there in Arizona. So, where are we? The Speaker of the House did not manage to get a scheduled vote on the 12 appropriations bills in the House of Representatives to send them over to the Senate before the fiscal year ended on September 30th. So I'm just catching those of you up in Aniana that are interested, right, at this point. So they had to either shut down the government, and by shut down the government, we're talking about 15% of the government would actually shut down. Paychecks would be suspended, but those individuals with suspended paychecks would be made whole. So not a lot. Several Republicans in the House felt that Kevin McCarthy had violated his word when he promised to pass said appropriations bills. Kevin McCarthy's position is that we had hundreds of amendments piled onto several of these bills. It was more difficult than we foresaw. The basic point that I'm making, and that some that are calling on the motion to vacate are making, is that Kevin McCarthy had the time. He sent the members of the body home. Why did you send the members of the body home if you knew that this possibly would come up? Well, McCarthy's response would be, I did not foresee this coming up in this fashion. Well, the time for stopgap measures is over. The time for omnibus measures is over. And if we cannot, when you see interest rates where they are, when you see inflation where it is, when you see the vast majority of the country believing that we're on the wrong path, when you see we've not just added a little bit in drips and drabs to the national debt over the course of the last 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 years. During the Biden presidency, that's about 2.5 years of it, and the Trump presidency, 4 years of that. So in 6.5 years, we've added $12+ trillion to the national debt in 6.5 years. Now, that's COVID, Matt. That's not all COVID. That's not all COVID. Some of it, Trump was responsible for about billion. Trillion. I can't even say it right. That's how much money it is. $1 trillion. $7.5 trillion. For the entirety of my life, as I have been a professional talk show host, we've been talking about doing something about the national debt. And I'm sick of talking about it. Whatever the motivations of Matt Gaetz or Andy Biggs or Tim Burchett or the others that are willing to do this, I think it's high time we upset the apple cart. And I think it's time we send a message to Washington, D.C. And it's as simple as it gets. do more of the same and we will not support you. You have to do something different in order to expect a different outcome or a different result. And at some point, $33 trillion is overwhelming. At some point, we have to stop and say no. And it's one of two options. Either balance your books or expect that we will be taxed more on the back end. And if not us, our children or our grandchildren. Folks, I don't think that I will see. I don't know. I almost said something, and I don't know if I believe it or not. Maybe I'll ask it in the form of a question. 615-737-9986 is the number. 615-737-9986. How long can we continue to go down this path and expect the United States of America to continue to exist as it currently does? The United States is at a breaking point where we are set to fracture, if not actually, then certainly ideologically. And the only other, if we don't win in 2024, and if we don't send a message right now in 2023 that we're willing to do what it takes to stop the burdensome and overbearing federal government, to stop the overspending, if we don't send that message and ultimately win in 2024, the only other option is to fracture. And obviously, that is a devastating comment. I don't say that lightly. What else do you suggest? We are going to eventually begin to, folks, this is Matt Murphy's prediction. You can call it dystopian if you want. If we can't accomplish action today, and if we see a failure in 2024 to take over the Senate and the White House, you will see people siloing themselves into like-minded states for the purpose of insulating themselves from the worst of the worst. Because if you see a Republican failure in the House, if you see Joe Biden winning the presidency or whoever the Democrats are throwing up there, what are you going to see? You're going to see 15 million more illegal aliens into this country to serve as votes for the Democrats. You will see our major cities in flames. Tell me that I'm wrong. We are at a declaration point in the United States of America. I'm 50 years old. And I think we'll see it in my lifetime. Sad as that is to say. The vote happening right now, Brian Westerman of Arkansas is standing at the podium speaking in defense of Kevin McCarthy. Let me listen to, I've met Westerman. He seems like a reasonable person. Let's listen to a little of this. Representative Westerman speaking in support, obviously, of Kevin McCarthy on the floor of the House of Representatives. All right, we continue along these lines. I'll tell you what, we'll take a short time out. We'll get your thoughts on all of this. It's an inflection point in American history. As he mentioned, not since 1910 has the vote been taken along these lines, and the speaker at the time survived that measure. Whether he survives or not remains to be seen. Vote set to be taken a little bit later on. Actually, I tell you what, Massey's speaking right now, and I assume he's speaking, well, I don't know. I don't want to assume anything. Let's listen to Thomas Massey. Let me add that, and I don't want to pull him down for a second. If Thomas then why couldn't they get their appropriations bills to the Senate? It's a simple question. If Kevin McCarthy has done such a great job, and I understand what they're saying, and I understand there's not an end game. I understand all of those things, but I don't care. Why have they not been able to get the appropriations bills to the Senate? This is not a matter of getting them over there and having the Democrats voting against them. They weren't able to get them over there. And once again, we're left with the same old, same old. 222, Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Quick timeout, back in a moment on Super Talk. They guarantee their best at USS, rock solid since 1994. They are a foundation repair and waterproofing company serving Middle Tennessee, Southern Kentucky, and Northern Alabama since 1994 with over 25,000 satisfied customers. So let's talk about the what and the why. What? On foundation repair, if you notice bricks cracking, walls bowing, doors or windows sticking, drywall separating, stair-step cracks in your masonry joints, all of these are telltale signs of your foundation settling to the point that you need to do something about it. Why? Well, sometimes it's extreme moisture or drought conditions that cause foundation failure. Other times, soils swell, and during wetter months, it shrinks during the cooler months, and that can cause it. The fluctuation creates voids, which allows for settlement under foundation walls. All of this is a recipe for disaster if you don't deal with it. And it's time to deal with it. Called USS. That's United Structural Systems. They've been the trusted voice in this since 1994, and you can trust that they will help you. USSTN.com. That's USSTN.com. They guarantee their best. USS. Make the call today. 615-488-7855. 488-7855 for USS.
The battle has begun on the House floor today over the fate of House Speaker Kevin McCarthy. Plus, a Democratic state lawmaker right here in Nashville filed a federal lawsuit against a powerful Republican. That and more. 2:30 Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
See, part of me wants to just blow through that and tell you who those names are and what the details are, but I wouldn't do that to Mac Morey back in the newsroom.
Appreciate that.
I love the nature of a good tease. He just he threw that line in the water, bloop, and there it is, the little bobber, and you're going to nibble. You're going to nibble at it over the next couple of minutes. You're going to nibble, and by the time you bite down on it, you'll know all the information, and there you go. You'll be knowledgeable.
And you have a hook in your mouth.
And you'll have a hook in your mouth. That's better than a hooker.
Bye. I don't know you.
Okay, so we're all kind of waiting to see what's next. I have no idea. I just spoke to a couple of members who are on the floor. I will not tell you who they are because I don't want to out them. These are private text-based conversations. One is from Tennessee. The other is from Alabama. You can probably figure these things out for yourself. What I'm being told by both is that the expectation is these conversations will last for another 15 minutes or so. These brief speeches in support of or against Speaker Kevin McCarthy. And then the vote will begin probably right around the time we're shutting down shop and heading over to Brian Wilson and the drive. Obviously, Brian's going to cover this for you comprehensively throughout the course of the afternoon. It is something that is not unprecedented, and I was doing some research during the break there. Not unprecedented in American history that you would take these votes of no confidence or votes to vacate, but it is unprecedented that a vote to vacate would be successful, initiated by the majority party, which is what's happening here. If I had to guess about what comes next, because understand something. As frustrated as we all are with the overspending, as frustrated as we are that they could not manage to get their appropriations bill in order, all of them, all 12 of them, and over to the Senate. Look, I forgive the House after that because the House is controlled by the Republicans. The Senate is not. This is not a matter of getting these things passed. Not for me. Think about it for a moment. In January, Kevin McCarthy promised that the House of Representatives would pass appropriations bills. Instead, they didn't. Instead, they had to rely on a 45-day stopgap continuing resolution with Democrats voting to extend that resolution in order for what? To get the appropriations bills passed? The Democrats will delay this as much as they possibly can until such time as they put the feet of the Republican Party over a barrel yet again, like they've done in so many years past. And folks, all I wanted to give McCarthy the opportunity to do was to put the ball in the court of the Democrats, to say, here are your appropriations bills. We carry the purse strings in the House of Representatives, and this is what we want to spend money on. And then make the Senate react. Instead, you weren't able to do it. And I don't know what to tell you. At the point that they hand it off to the Senate, then I forgive them everything else. In other words, I don't expect them to make miracles when there are Democrats in control of the Senate and there's a Democrat in the White House. But I am elephantine about this much. They scream and yell about only having one half of one branch of government. But when they have the Senate and the House and the White House, they don't do anything to stop spending either. They spend on their own pet projects. It's time to kick over the anthill and see what comes out of it. It's 2:31 on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
2:31, I'm Mac Maury with your top stories. Mostly sunny right now, 86 degrees in Music City. Got a full weather forecast coming up in 2 minutes. The battle has begun on the House floor today over the fate of Speaker Kevin McCarthy, facing a motion to vacate from Republican Matt Gaetz and a number of conservative lawmakers.
Speeches on the House floor over a motion to table the motion to oust House Speaker Kevin McCarthy. It's McCarthy's last chance to keep his speakership, but if there aren't enough votes, a motion for McCarthy to vacate the speakership is on. A move pushed by fellow Republican Congressman Matt Gaetz, angry at McCarthy after he worked with Democrats to avert a government shutdown.
We're up to 6 Republicans who have said that they are in favor of this motion to vacate. Those are Gaetz, of course, Biggs, Crane, Burchett, Good, and now Rosendale has come out in support of this. It's worth noting that even though there's only 6 of them, the majority of the conference still does support McCarthy, but Democrats sent a Dear Colleague letter from Leader Jeffries that said that they will vote yes on this motion to vacate.
ABC's Catherine Falders. If Gaetz' effort is successful, it would be the first time in history that the House will have voted to remove a sitting speaker. The White House, for its part, staying out of it, but saying there's absolutely chaos in the House GOP.
And right now in Tennessee, a Democratic state lawmaker in Nashville has filed a federal lawsuit claiming his rights were violated by a powerful Republican.
Nashville Democrat State Rep Justin Jones is suing the state and Tennessee Speaker of the House Cameron Sexton. Jones' lawsuit claims his expulsion from the House infringed upon his right to freedom of speech. Back in April, Jones and another Democrat member were expelled after being accused of violating House decorum by joining that anti-gun protest with a bullhorn on the floor of the House after the deadly Covenant School shooting. Jones and the other member who was expelled, Memphis Democrat Justin Pearson, were reelected to fill out the rest of their terms. Ken Weaver, WTN News.
And Jones also argues he was forced to spend money and resources to mount a second election campaign after his expulsion. That's the latest news. Weather's next. I'm Mac Maury, WTN News.
As you look for good, solid, conservative voices around the state of Tennessee, might I point you in the direction of the Mill Creek View Tennessee podcast. Steve Abramowitz and his team, they do a great job with their podcast. Obviously, they talk quite a bit about politics, local to the Franklin area, to Middle Tennessee, and all across the state. And really, it applies to the nation. But they also have more than just political-based podcasts. They have entertainment figures, sports figures, cultural touchstones, authors, artists, and the like on the podcast as well. If it matters to the people of Middle Tennessee, if it matters to the people of Tennessee more broadly, it matters to Mill Creek View. You can find them on Deezer, iTunes, iHeart, Spotify, all your favorite podcast apps. You can also find them on Rumble. Mill Creek View Tennessee can also be found online at mcview.us. That's mcview.us, a great resource that. Give Steve Abramowitz a try. You will not be disappointed. He's been covering the Franklin mayor's race and the ancillary alderman races like nobody else in this community. It's Mill Creek View. Go to mcview.us. That's mcview.us. I'm going to jump on the phone. It is the Matt Murphy Show, by the way. Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Thank you for being here. Very consequential day in Washington, D.C. We've been monitoring proceedings on the floor of the House of Representatives as we are approaching a vote as to whether or not to oust Kevin McCarthy as Speaker of the House, and that would reset the body, and they would have to vote in terms of who will be the next Speaker. My expectation, as I've said all along, is that, and I don't know that this is what will happen. I do know this, that if everyone in the body votes, the Republicans have enough, if all the Democrats join them in voting against Kevin McCarthy, there are enough Republicans that they would have a majority and they would oust Kevin McCarthy. Now, several things can happen. One, a number of those Democrats can vote in favor of keeping Kevin McCarthy, and he would survive. That's a possibility. Number two, a number of Democrats, or, well, one would presume it would have to be Democrats, a number of Democrats could leave the body and lower the threshold necessary to accomplish the vote. That's number two. Number three, they could potentially come to some sort of backroom deal prior to the votes happening, and all of this would be off the table, but I think we're beyond that point at this stage. Without having any intimate knowledge outside of several communications that I've had with congressional members, let me reset this on this front. Right now, Gates has about 7 minutes left, maybe a little bit less, and the side positioned to defend Kevin McCarthy has about 10 minutes left. I believe that's right. So we're down to it. Around the time that Brian Wilson takes the airwaves, and I expect he's following this as we speak, and we'll talk with him in about 10 minutes or so. Right around the time he comes on air, the votes will begin, if my math is correct, after a few procedural elements. And then we'll figure it out. This is my best guess as to what is going to happen. And that's all it is. It's a guess. All the Democrats will vote against McCarthy, and enough Republicans will vote against McCarthy that Kevin McCarthy will be removed as Speaker of the House. Then we will begin the procedure of attempting to find a new Speaker of the House. Much like happened in January, there will be jostling and nominations and then vote taking. I expect that at some point, because Kevin McCarthy enjoys the support of the vast majority of Republicans, at some point they will either break the other Republicans that are voting against him, and there aren't that many of them. There are only like 8 or maybe 10. They will either break those individuals, or Kevin McCarthy will strike some sort of deal with Democrats, and he will get enough Democrats to vote in favor of him that he will be seated as a one would guess new Speaker of the House. In other words, my prediction is Kevin McCarthy will be removed as Speaker. The Democrats will allow that to happen so as to embarrass him and embarrass the Republicans and weaken the Republicans. And then potentially they will play out the string. Chris says he won't be voted out. Chris, tell me how. You're either depending on Democrats voting in favor of him, and maybe they will, but why would Democrats do that? Here's my logic. Democrats want to play out this 45-day stopgap measure as much as they can. They want to focus on anything other than the budgets so as not to put the onus on the Senate during this period in time. They want to push everything to in Washington, D.C. to Thanksgiving to put pressure on Republicans to pass an omnibus spending package, which would be disastrous for conservatism in Washington, D.C. So Chris says Republicans should support him. All right, I guess I need to reset. And Chris, I'm not faulting you for this. The vast majority of Republicans do, but Republicans have a razor-thin majority, and every member gets to vote on who's going to be the leader of the House of Representatives. So if all the Democrats vote against Kevin McCarthy and as few as 5 Republicans vote against him, Kevin McCarthy's out. Every other Republican can support him, and he will still be out. So it's not a matter of the vast majority of Republicans supporting him. It's a matter of those Republicans that believe that he did not keep to his word on the appropriations bill. And I'm right there with him. He promised to pass 12 appropriations bills. He didn't keep that promise. Why? Well, we didn't have time. Then why did you go home for a month? I can't. I'm having a
Why did you agree to the promise?
I'm having a very difficult time resolving that in my head. Well, we didn't know. What do you mean you didn't know? This happens every year. Every year they claim they didn't know. Every year they claim they didn't have enough time. Every year when they pass these garbage omnibus bills and these continuing resolutions, it's all about, well, we didn't know. What about the calendar didn't you know? Well, we didn't know they'd pass all these amendments. What didn't you know? I'm sorry, I get worked up about this. It was last month. It wasn't last year. It was last month. Yet Washington, D.C. wants to pee on our head and tell us it's raining. There's a lot of them that need to go. Now, where all this ends, it all ends with Kevin McCarthy, in my opinion, being the Speaker of the House again. That's where it ends. But maybe with a little message from the people. Every year they go home for August. You're right, Joe. Every year they do. But this year, we made promises to the American people. This year, Kevin McCarthy made a promise to the American people. And it wasn't a promise contingent on us agreeing that they get to go home. They promised to pass the appropriations bills before the end of the fiscal year, and they didn't do it. Why not? Well, it wasn't his fault. I'm so sick to death of the excuses. Excuses after excuse. And by the way, all of us that supported Donald Trump and do support Donald Trump for 2024, we need to send a message to Donald Trump to stop overspending too. This isn't just about Democrats overspending. It's about Republicans. It's even more about Republicans overspending. If I make a promise to my boss that I'm going to do something by a particular time, my boss does not want to hear excuses. The American people, we are the boss. Hey, I got a member of leadership, Elise Stefanik, standing before the podium. Let's listen in. Go ahead. Let's listen in. Okay, she's making me angry. Get her out. Get her out. He brought hundreds of our congressional leaders, hundreds of Congress people got to take free trips to Israel. Did she actually just say that? Come on, man. I'm not worried about what you did. I'm worried about what you did not do. And I do think it's a stand that has to have an end. And that end will lead to Kevin McCarthy as the Speaker of the House. But it's an important message to send. Look at Brian Wilson's take on all of this and find out what's going down during the drive. Well, a vote will be going down during the drive. We do know that. 247 on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
The fate of House Speaker Kevin McCarthy in the balance as a motion to vacate him is ongoing. The Harpeth River in Williamson County has turned red. And back in the nation's capital, Ukraine funding. 3 o'clock, Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
Red with the blood of tyrants. No? No, something different. All right, Belle K, do me a favor. I apologize for producing while on air, but let Bob and Drew know that we love them. We will not be able to get to them today. I don't want them to have to wait because I want to get to Brian Wilson. I got to tell you, watching the proceedings on the floor, I know not to do this. Don't watch the sausage get made. You'll never eat sausage again. And I'm watching as certain members are defending Kevin McCarthy by talking about the fact that they passed the strongest border security bills in the history of the United States of America, which is all well and good, except it didn't do anything to secure the border because the Senate did not take them up. So their accomplishments aren't accomplishments in reality. They're just accomplishments in principle, I guess. One way or the other, I don't know, but I have a feeling that Brian Wilson will not be talking about tiddlywinks this afternoon, that he'll be talking about the vote that's set to go on maybe before he even starts the show. Hey, Brian, how are you?
So something going on today?
Oh, my goodness. Are you watching this thing?
I am watching it. Look, I can't tell you. I wish I had a nickel for every time I had to watch a debate on the floor of the House. But this is something that hasn't happened since 1910. Look, it doesn't look very good for McCarthy this afternoon the way it looks to me. When you had the motion to table go down by about 11 votes and McCarthy can only afford to lose about 5, it sounds like to me that there's going to be 5 votes against him, and we're going to be, I think, before my show is over, without a speaker. And then you know how hard it was to figure out who our next speaker was going to be, and nothing can go forward. That's the thing. Nothing can happen in the House. With the clock ticking, 45 days to avoid another government shutdown, nothing can happen. It cannot go forward until a new speaker is chosen.
Well, and I don't want to give up too much of the drive with Brian Wilson and your take on all of this, Brian, but it's why my position is I don't think any Democrats will be there to help McCarthy today. Maybe
Not today.
Maybe they will down the road, but they want to embarrass the Republicans as much as they can right now.
Right, and this is a very interesting thing. And remember, you've got a situation where really it's about 5 or 6, maybe as many as 10 members of the Republican caucus in the House who are driving this thing, when the vast majority of the Republican caucus still supports McCarthy. So, that's the way it is when you have a very, very tight margin. So it's going to be, fascinating. If you love politics, this is going to be a fascinating afternoon. And it just seems to me that we're probably headed to a vote here in a moment to vacate the chair, and we will not have a speaker in short order.
You mentioned 1910, Brian, and I was trying to, but the speaker in that case.
I remember it as if it was yesterday.
That's what I figured I'd ask you for, Brian. You've been around but the speaker survived that, right?
It was Joe Cannon, and Joe Cannon, he has a building named after him now there on Capitol Hill. Cannon actually brought the motion to vacate, and he got reappointed speaker with the help of the Democrats in that particular case. That did not happen today.
Well, it's just a fascinating set of circumstances that is before us this afternoon. I know you'll be covering it comprehensively all afternoon long. Anything else on the radar, or are we singularly focused on the activity of the House?
No, I think there's some interesting stuff happening with the former president and his case today. We've got a whole. I've got an embarrassment of riches to talk about, but I think the top story is going to be what's happening on the floor of the House right now.
There he is, Brian Wilson, coming up in mere moments right after Mac Morey and the news at the top of the hour. That would be 3 p.m. in the Central Time Zone. A vote is set to begin very soon, and Brian will cover it comprehensively on the drive. Listen in. Don't miss a moment. We'll be back tomorrow at high noon to review all of the activity of this afternoon. That is tomorrow. Until then, have a wonderful day, folks. Enjoy your time with your family and your loved ones. We'll be back tomorrow. Until then, so long.